And welcome to Around the Ozarks Spotlight. Each week, we uncover the stories behind the people who live and work here in Southwest Missouri. Those individuals with entrepreneurial spirit who work to develop the lives of others or even put pen to paper to write books about the stories and history of the Ozarks and its people. I'm Scott Meier, your host, and today we're exploring the world of Missouri's wildlife with Missouri's Department of Conservation media specialist here in the Southwest, Francis Skalicky. And Francis has been with us before. Good morning, Francis. How are you?
Good morning, Scott. Glad to be here.
I love having you on, Francis, because you bring literally the wildlife and the wild plants and the wild everything to life here in Missouri. And we've got so much that we can cover, but we don't have that much time, so we'll cover as much as we can with what little time we have today. About a year ago, Francis, we had a show where you were talking about the Missouri's effort to bring the bear population back to Missouri, and I believe you mentioned something about where they got the bears from. Where were those bears originally brought down here from?
Okay, well, yes, it wasn't Missouri, it was Arkansas, and the Missouri part of this story is doing it all on the Missouri Bears are doing it all on their own. So yeah, let's go back to the days of Lewis and Clark, early settlement, pre-settlement Missouri. There were black bears statewide Missouri, all across
Mm-hmm.
the state. Overhunting, habitat change, all the kind of stuff that usually hurts wildlife populations, hurt bears. By the early 1900s, they were pretty much gone from the Missouri. And why I say pretty much is that's still kind of gray, and I'll get back to that in a second. But
Okay.
we let's just say we thought they were completely gone from Missouri. So in the late 1950s and early 1960s, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission did
Mm-hmm.
a bear reintroduction program, and they got their bears from, I want to say, like the very northern maybe Minnesota and southern Canada, somewhere maybe even Wisconsin. They got it from a specific area, but anyway, and they reintroduced them into Arkansas, into northern Arkansas. Now
Mm-hmm.
that population did well and expanded, and since Missouri is on the top of Arkansas, as that
Sure.
population expanded, it expanded up into Missouri. So that's where we thought we got all our bears. And we in the 1980s we did some very rudimentary bear studies. By the rudimentary, I mean basically we just look for bear signs, and it's like, yeah, we've got bears. We put out some food. We've got bears. We
Mm-hmm.
know that's what we know. But in early 2000s, about 2010, 2011, we really did a down in the weeds bear study. We worked with the University of Mississippi. They helped us with some staff, and what we did, we actually we tranquilized some bears.
Mm-hmm.
We trapped some bears, tranquilized them, did all kinds of genetic information, and radio collared some to find out where they go, what their annual life cycles are, where they travel, and through that we found out some very interesting information. And one of the things was getting back, whenever we collared a bear, we did blood samples, and
Mm-hmm.
because the Arkansas bears came from all one part of the country, they all had the same genetic type, and but some of the bears that we collared and drew blood from did not have that genotype. So we presumed that those bears were actually descendants of Missouri's native bear population, that they weren't
So
transplanted
there
from
still was
Arkansas.
a population. It
There
wasn't a
still
big
was a
population.
population. And the thing
Mm-hmm.
is, Scott, since we don't have the genotype of that original population, we can't compare it to anything. But since it didn't match the Arkansas bears, which it should have, and most of the bears we did, because
Mm-hmm.
it was just an extension of that. But a few of these didn't, so we thought maybe they just somehow, some way, they held out in the remote parts of the Ozarks and the remote parts of southeast Missouri, and our bear population did hang on. But however they got here, now we have a bear population that's probably a little over 1,000 bears.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I mean, some people say wow to that, but the bigger wow is because bears don't know state lines. I mean, we think of wildlife populations in regional terms.
Sure.
This region for this bear population is Missouri, primarily southern Missouri, Arkansas, and eastern Oklahoma. Within that region, we think there's about 8,000 bears.
Wow.
So that's kind of a wow number. So bears are doing well. I mean, and it's kind of encouraging that in 21st century Missouri, when there's all kinds of changes to the landscape, that
Mhm.
a large mammal population can still do well, and that's what bears are doing. In Missouri, the population is increasing by about 9% per year. That's a good growth rate. And the main way we see that population increase is these bears that show up on the edge of towns, the bears
Mhm.
that show up on the edge of farms, things like that. The bears are wild animals. They're supposed to be in the woods. They primarily are forested habitat. But when habitat A is kind of taken up, they look for plan B, and that plan B sometimes leads them into closer contact with humans.
Now, Francis, we've got some friends that live over near Gallatin, Tennessee, and they've actually got a bear issue over there. Bears are in town, bears are in their cars, bears are in their backyards, bears are everywhere. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today, this time of the year, now we're into March, bears are waking up, right? Do bears
Yes.
hibernate in Missouri just like they would up north?
Well,
Or
yeah. Oh, interesting you should ask that, Scott. I'm glad you asked that. If you want to get down into the weeds of science, bears aren't considered true hibernators, because a true hibernator basically goes into an inactive sleep state in late November, December, and doesn't wake up till in March or April,
Mhm.
where like a groundhog, like a ground squirrel. Bears do have brief periods of activity during the winter. So the best thing to say is that they overwinter. They go through long periods of inactivity, but they come out of this inactivity, yes, in late March, April. And
Mhm.
then what happens is, you're right, they start what the main bear human conflict issue is, excuse me, in a family unit where you have like a yearling male, a year and a half, that mother is either with cubs or she's looking to for another mate. So she
Mhm.
doesn't want these grown offspring around. So those yearling males are kicked out of the family unit, and so they're wandering looking for new habitat, a place they can call their own. And if they come upon things like a trash can with its lid that's unsecured, with a pet food dish with a lot of pet food in, man, okay, that's food, and they will stick there. So that's why we have this message about being bear wise.
Sure.
I'll get back to your question. I know I'm giving long answers, but it's just, this is the time of year that bears, particularly young males, are looking for food as part of their new territories, and we don't want to provide them that food.
Francis Skalicky is my guest today on Around the Ozark Spotlight. Francis with the Missouri Department of Conservation. Now, Francis, let's talk about that. If as our friends were saying in Tennessee, where they literally have them climbing in and out of their cars. I mean, they've got a real bear issue over there. These are black bears. They're not brown bears. They're not grizzly bears. But if you happen upon a bear, or a bear happens upon you here in Missouri, what should people do?
Well, you're right. They are black bears. So the threat to your personal safety is not great. What they're looking for is food. However, the threat to your property is bigger because you have a large mammal that is looking for food and is very
Hmm.
aggressive and strong at looking for that. So it's not afraid to tear up some buildings while it's looking for food. So back to your question, what should people do? Is they should get that bear to, if they have a bear hanging around their home, around their barn, around anywhere that's close to human dwellings, get that bear to move on, make noise. If they have firearms, firearm up into the air. And we do have a bear season, but it's not now, so it's
Hmm.
that you can't do that now.
Right.
But fire, and you need permits for that too. But anyway, firearms up in the air. Just try to get that bear to move on. And if you can't get the bear to move on by yourself,
Hmm.
call your nearest Department of Conservation office or conservation agent, and we have things that can help get that bear to move on. A very popular thing we use is they're called shell crackers. It's a combination of a shotgun shell and a firecracker. They
Hmm.
shoot this shell at the bear. It hits the bear, doesn't penetrate or anything, but it pops off or it bounces off the bear, explodes, and scares the bear. So the main thing you want to do is the bears don't like loud noises. They don't like to be around where there's going to be disturbance. So create as much disturbance as possible. The very best, and it's not always this easy, but uh, a number of years ago, back when Channel 33 still had newscast PR, there was a newscast of a woman near Marshfield who had a bear near her home, and she drove it off with a broom. And I think it's her daughter was taking a phone video of this, and she
Sure.
was just talking to this bear like it was a dog that was not. I mean, it was just like, get scat, move on, move on. And she was just swatting this bear with a broom, and it ran on. Not always that easy, but my point is that you don't have to freak out when you have a bear on your place. It's a wild
Hmm.
animal. I mean, they're here, but you don't have to encourage them to be there. So somehow let them know that they're not supposed to be around your home. And if you can't do that on your own, call the Missouri Department of Conservation, and we
Sure.
can help get that bear to move on.
Now, you mentioned harvesting a little bit. There is an actual bear season here in Missouri.
Yeah, there is bear season. It's in October, and
Hmm.
it's both combo archery and firearm season. And I forget the actual harvest. I think one year there was maybe like 9 bears taken. One bear, I know one year I think there was 12 bears taken. But my point is, it's a pretty low harvest. So it is an opportunity for people to hunt bear in Missouri if they
Hmm.
and how they just it's usually in May is when we have the drawing for that. When the application for that, you apply for the bear season. Tags are drawn. So many tags are drawn, and if your tag is drawn, you're assigned a zone. There's 3 zones you hunt in. So that's an opportunity for some people to enjoy bear hunting. But from the start, and I think we've had bear season. I think this will be our 4th bear season. One thing that was we wanted to stress is this won't solve the bear human conflicts that we have this hunting season. And
Hmm.
as odd as it sounds, there's a good side to that statement. And the good side is that means that the bear population in Missouri is doing well and it's growing. And anytime a wildlife population is holding steady in a state, that bodes well for other things along with it.
Francis, what's the benefit? Other than they're amazing to watch, and
Right.
like you say, it's a large mammal. We're not used to seeing those kinds of things in the wild these days, but now we have that. But what's the benefit to the resources of Missouri to have this bear population?
One benefit, and it doesn't get promoted a lot, but if you look it up, it's always there, is seed dispersal. Bears are omnivores. In other words, they eat meat and plants. But one of the things they eat, especially in the spring, is a lot of plants, and they have seeds. And so
Hmm.
when those seeds pass through the body, that's a way for this animal or for this plant to disperse its seeds in a much wider range than uh, if that plant would just have dropped its seeds in its immediate vicinity. So one benefit is seed dispersal of various types of plants, various types of
Hmm.
native plants. Uh, and another uh, benefit is just, and this is a little bit of a broader picture, but it's biodiversity. And the more species you have doing healthy on the landscape, that means the better that landscape is in the terms of wildlife habitat. The fewer species you have, that means the more problems you have. So again, if we can have a large mammal like a bear that's doing well in Missouri, that bodes well for the outdoors. And there is plenty of outdoor habitat for the
Hmm.
bears that, if you see one around your barn or if you see one next to your bird feeder or your trash can, don't think, oh, that's poor bear. There's so many bears. This is the only place it's got to go. There's plenty of more remote natural bear habitat to go to. So, that's why that bear needs to be moved on, because 2 things can happen on the human and the bear side. Neither one is good. On the bear side, the more bears get used to getting food from unintentional handouts. I mean,
Hmm.
that would be like trash cans with lids unsecured, with pet food dishes that has pet food in overnight, bird feeders, whatever. The more it gets used to getting that, the less it will look for food in the wild. The more this becomes its routine, and those are the bears that usually have to end up being euthanized, because wherever we move them to, they just start looking for that human food again. They've
Sure.
basically forgotten how to get their natural food. Okay, so that's from the bear side. From the human side, as I said earlier, the more a bear finds food. I don't want to say gets food, because we should, by no means you should purposely feed it, but the more it finds food, the more it's going to search for that food. And you have a large, strong mammal that gets very aggressive at looking for food. And while it doesn't pose a big threat to humans, it poses a big threat to your property, and that can still come out of your pocketbook.
Yeah. We're going to be back in a moment with more on Around the Ozarks Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott Meier. Back in just a minute.
Hey, everybody, it's Ethan and Sarah Forhetz from your favorite podcast, Around the Ozarks in 5. I'm sure you've been wondering, how can I get even more amazing stories, events, and witty banter to start my day?
Well, look no further. Here we are. Sign up for our daily newsletter. You'll have what's going on around the Ozarks right at your fingertips each weekday morning.
Yeah, just go to aroundtheozarks.com, click on the newsletter tab to sign up.
Thanks for listening to Around the Ozarks in 5. We hope to see you in your inbox soon.
Welcome back to the second half of today's Around the Ozarks Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott Meier. With me is my good friend, Francis Skalicky. Francis is the current Missouri Department of Conservation media specialist for the southwest part of the state. Francis, before we get into the next subject, a little bird told me you're thinking about retiring.
Well, the word's getting around, yes. I will. There's no probably. I will retire January of 2026. I will have put in 30 years with the Department of Conservation. You know, Scott, this is a great agency to work for, both internally and externally. Internally, I work with some of the top wildlife experts, foresters, fisheries biologists in the state. I mean, our knowledge is cited all over the country in research papers about various topics. So I work with the best from the resource side. Externally, it's always good to work in an agency where people understand what you're doing and why it's important. And that is Missouri, especially here in southern Missouri. I mean, we have the lakes, we have the hunting, we just have people like to float, camp, hike. And anytime, so basically what I'm saying, I'm preaching to the choir about why this stuff's important. And anytime your job involves telling people this is important and they already know it's important, well, that's easy, and we get a lot of support, and I can go all the way back to when the Conservation Department was formed in 1936. It was formed through a vote, an amendment to the Constitution of Missouri, and it was a vote of the people in 1936 election. They wanted a non-political agency to manage fish, forest, and wildlife. Big boost came in 1976 when the conservation tax was voted in. I think most people know this, but in Missouri, 1/8% of all the sales tax in Missouri gets redirected to the conservation efforts. Now, so in other words, you're paying that sales tax anyway, but 1/8 gets redirected, and that has made today that's like 2/3 of our funding. So that has made a huge difference. And that too was voted in by the people in the election of 1976. So those are two specific examples of public support. And beyond that, the public support we have just got throughout the history of our agency for our programs, for our regulations. It's just great to work with people who understand what you're doing and appreciate it.
Spring's around the corner. Spring means fishing, which is a personal favorite of mine. And I think we're already in trout season, are we not?
Yes. The trout park season, and that's everybody calls it trout season. But as people know, that you can fish for trout at Lake Taneycomo, you can fish for trout at some of our areas like Crane Creek, and some of those throughout the year. But it's the trout park season at the 4 trout parks: Roaring River, Bennett Spring, Montauk, and Merrimack Spring Park, from March 1st through October 31st. Yes, it started March 1st. And, the thing is, March 1st opener gets all the hoopla, which it should, because it's a big deal.
Yes, it does.
But those parks are open until October 31st. So don't forget, it's not a one-day deal. Now, The one thing I always tell people about fishing at the trout parks, if you've never done it before, on the advantage, before I get to what I tell people, it's a great family. It's a stock stream. So it's a good opportunity for all members of the family to catch fish. The one thing I do tell people, and this is not a huge deal, but it is something to ask about: when you get your trout tag at the store whenever park you go to. Tell them what lure you're going to use, because each park has specific zones based on the type of lure you use. Usually it's like 2 zones or 3 zones or something like that. And tell them what lure you have. If you don't know, tell them what lure you have, and they will tell you where in the park you can fit. You can't just buy your tag, go to the nearest open spot and start fishing. It's got to be, you fish in a specific zone based on what type of lure you use. Not a huge deal, but still something to ask about.
Well, it's amazing fun. If people haven't done it yet, you got to try it. I was at Bennett Springs a couple of years ago, and my favorite day was about a week after opener, because opener's crazy. I mean, you can't. You've got people on your left and right, and they're almost in your waders, But
and the thing is, some people say that's why they stay away from the March 1st opener, but some people say that's why they love the March 1st opener. It's such a Fish-a-palooza type event. So, and that's what's great about fishing in Missouri. That specifically at the trout parks and broader, if you don't like that March 1st craziness, well, go another time to the trout parks or go to Taneycomo or someplace. But trout isn't the only thing. In March, we also have walleye, we have white bass. They're both coming on strong. We also have the paddlefish season. Starts March 15th through April 30th. Paddlefish are an interesting story too. They are found.
What do you do with them, Francis? I've seen these things. Now I'm from up north. I moved down here from Wisconsin and Michigan. So I'm used to walleyes and crappies and that sort of thing. And I saw a paddlefish, and I mean, they're huge, but what do you do with them? What's the purpose?
Well, there are very meaty fish. They're very good fish. You can, you basically process them. You butcher them like you would a large meaty creature. And you can grill them. You can fry them. Technically you're filleting them, but when you got that much meat on the side, you cut it up. You could call it steaks if you want, but they're a good fish to catch. But the interesting thing about the paddlefish is the way you catch them. You blind snag. You don't put a lure on a hook and drop a lure in the water and hope the paddlefish finds it. You find a concentration of paddlefish with your electronic fish finding equipment, and then you drop a large hook over the side, and you blind snag, and you start drop that hook, pull up, drop that hook, pull up, and the hope is that hook will catch the paddlefish and pull it up. So
now, what's a record paddlefish for Missouri? What are we talking about?
Gosh, it's 100 and some pounds. It's
wow.
116 maybe. It's over 100 pounds, and 116 doesn't even seem right, but it's over 100 pounds. But the interesting thing about paddlefish is they are in pre-settlement, early settlement Missouri, they were a big river fish, which in Missouri is the Missouri River and the Mississippi River. Well, and they had a huge spawning ground up into the Osage River, which flows into the Missouri River. But when they built Truman Lake in the 1970s, that destroyed that spawning ground. But as part of the mitigation efforts between the Corps of Engineers, which built that, and Missouri Department of Conservation, there was a program to raise paddlefish. And so we raise paddlefish each year in, I think it's Sweet Springs Hatchery, I think. It is. I'm sorry, I should know this. But let's see. Yes, it's Sweet Springs Hatchery. No, I'm sorry. It's Blind Pony Hatchery near Sweet Springs. And we catch female paddlefish in the spring from Table Rock, and we remove the eggs from the female paddlefish. We take them up to Blind Pony Hatchery. We raise them in a artificial and a cultured situation. Then we release those paddlefish when they're decides to be released. We release them back into Table Rock and in Truman Lake and in Lake of the Ozarks. So fishing for paddlefish in the lakes, it's Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks, and Truman. Now in Table Rock, they do also go up into the James River too, and you can fish from the James River. But the season for paddlefish, which that's one of the few fish that actually have a season, it's March 15th through April 30th. So,
is there a limit as well?
Yes, but I don't know it. I'm sorry. I don't know it. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to blind ask you on paddlefish.
No. I should know that. but yes, I mean, well, like with all things, check your regulations. So
So a paddlefish is primarily a bottom feeder. Is it similar to catfish that
no,
way, or no?
actually, it rakes. It filters. It's a filter feeder. It filters
Hmm.
very small creatures through its system, and it just so it goes through the water, filtering these small creatures out of the water and feeding on them, and that's how it feeds. So, uh, uh, and like I say, it's a very ancient fish. In fact,
Hmm.
interesting story. I think the very first paddlefish that was found from prehistoric times was found within the skeleton of a duck-billed dinosaur in Montana. And so the duck-billed dinosaur did not eat the paddlefish. The duck-billed dinosaur was a herbivore, was a plant
Hmm.
eater. But they think that probably either the dinosaur must have fallen down and crushed this paddlefish, or the paddlefish swung as the dinosaur was rotting. The paddlefish swung in its rib cage and then couldn't escape and died there. But anyway, that's a little interesting side. Like the very first, it does date from prehistoric times. And we know that because the very first paddlefish was found in prehistoric times, found inside a duck-billed dinosaur. So
Now,
that's your paddlefish trivia for the day.
that's I finally found out about paddlefish. I appreciate that. My guest
There you
today at
go.
Around the Ozark Spotlight is Francis Skalicky. Francis with the Missouri Department of Conservation and has been for 30 years, knows about everything there is to know about conservation here in Missouri. Last year, we talked a little bit about, we're a little early in the season, but once the plants start happening in the lakes, now you've got the issues of people taking boats from Lake 1 to Lake 2 or Lake 3, and the plants begin to move around in the lakes.
Yes.
That was a problem last year. You see that as a problem for some time?
It will still be a problem. It's called hydrilla, is mainly what we're looking for. It's a non-native aquatic plant that can grow very thick, and it can choke out native plants. It can cause problems for native aquatic species, fish, and other things. We're finding it less in Missouri, but two things are
Good.
going on. We're still finding it. So when we're finding it, that means it can still be moved around from lake to lake. It is still
Mhm.
in other states, so people who fish it can still be brought in from other states. So yes, Scott, clean, drain, dry. That goes to it helps from passing zebra mussels around too. Where is if you clean, drain, dry. When you are finished boating for the day, you clean your boat. You get your boat at the edge of the lake. You hose it off. Drain all the water from the live wells, all the part you can drain water from, and then you park it in a sunny area. When you get home, let it dry for a little bit, and anything that's still on it would dry enough that it would die and would not be able to move on to another lake.
We got about a minute and a half left here, Francis. Is there anything now in the spring of 2025 that's got kind of the focus of the department as we head into the busy season, certainly with the Missouri DNR?
Oh, with Missouri Conservation.
Well, Missouri
DNR is
Conservation.
a different agency.
That's
Anyway, no, I would just say, yeah, just keeping the trust of the public. That is our ongoing mission. That's our ongoing quest. Through our programs, through our regulations, we have it. If surveys show we do have the trust of the public. We definitely want to maintain that. So, through we anytime there's a public meeting, we do constant surveys, but that's our ongoing quest, is through everything from our hunting and fishing regulations to the programs we have at the Nature Center. We want to keep people, we want to keep their trust, we want to keep their confidence, because getting back to those elections, what I talked about, they voted us as a non-political fish and game agency in 1936. They voted the sales tax force in 1976. We realize that as a gift, and we want to handle those gifts as precious, and we want to cherish them as best we can.
Francis, in the 30 seconds we have left, what are you going to do with all that stuff behind you on the wall?
I don't know. I have told my wife that, could we make room for this when I retire, and She said, well, she didn't give me a yes, Scott. So I
You-
think that's a conversation that's still taking place.
So you don't get a room in the house that can become your office, because believe me, I've been
That-
retired now for a couple of years. Having an office somewhere is really handy when you've had an office
That's
as
what
many
I
years
want.
as we have.
Well, that's right, Scott. That's what I want. But as I said, that conversation between me and my wife is still ongoing. So I'll keep you
Well,
updated.
you'll have some time to do that. Francis, I want to thank you again for being my guest today on Around the Ozark Spotlight. Also, thank my producers, Taylor Worley and Jay Stevens, and all of you for joining us today. If you happen to miss all or part of this conversation today, you can always find it on ATO Spotlight on the AroundTheOzarks.com app, or actually in YouTube. You can find it on YouTube under Around the Ozark Spotlight. Or the ATO app, which is found in either the App Store or Apple apps or Android apps. And there you're going to find today's show as well as all of this past year's programs. I'm Scott Meier. Remember, every day is a gift, the best present you could ever receive. Have a great day.